Okay, thank you, Rajesh, and thank you all my Geeta Group colleagues for giving me this chance. And I'm presenting, and I'm very nervous. I've got my ex-boss, Mr. Sahi from Reliance, and I've got Rupa, and I've got so many people. So I'm a little nervous, but let me try to do what I can. So here, what I'm going to do today is I'll just take you through my journey and what kind of people, godmen, methods I've dabbled with, and how things have panned out for me. So here's a quick overall summary. So you see at the top left, transcendental meditation. In 1982, at the age of 16 years, okay, Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, and of course this was a meditation technique. Then in 1999, I learned the art of living Sudarshan Kriya, of course, Shri Ravi Shankar, and I just call it more of, pranayam. And then inner engineering in 2009 at the age of 43, Sadhguru. And of course, this had, Hatha Yoga and breathing and meditation. And I'm just trying to compare the slide on top with what is written at the bottom. So Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga has 8 steps, which we all know. And how did my journey compare with these 8 steps? So let's just take a look at that. So, for me, if you see the cycle, this is the cycle how it should be, up to down. But for me, it was the other way around. So TM, I call it dhyan.
Rajiv, sorry, not able to see your slides.
Oh,
are you sharing the screen?
We can see it.
No, we can see.
We can see it.
all see. Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall I continue or
continue?
Okay, fine. And are you able to see the pointer like it's at TM now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
So typically this is how the methods and the flow has to be but for me it was the other way around. I started with TM, which is dhyan, and pratyahar and dharana, which is concentration. It was told that it will happen if you meditate. This should be a consequence of the meditation and not actively. And then art of living, pranayam, and then of course in inner engineering you may be surprised, but there was a lot of focus on asanas, and this is the time I really got my act together here. And Yam Niyam for me has been partial. So how do we look at this journey? Is it good, bad, or ugly? So should I compliment myself that I cracked the bigger problem first and turned the pyramid upside down? Or should I whip myself? Because after all, I had come across Patanjali's Yoga Sutras way back in 1985 by one of the disciples of Maharshi who had given this book to me. So let's analyze, this question in the light of what really has happened. So let's first start with TM. So TM, I was in a boarding school in Dehradun, and Maharshi ji had sent his American disciples, young, smart-looking American boys who had come to, sort of teach us transcendental meditation. And they stayed with us on campus, and the way we saw them, the way they conducted themselves, and it was really an impressive thing. And it was not only the method, but interacting with them, staying with them. And of course there was a promise of better concentration, and you can manage with less sleep. And of course at that time one was really fiercely competitive, and I was thinking, if somebody else has better concentration and can study more than me, then I will not get the rank which I want. So it was some kind of a greed, and also a lot of as I said, they promised so many things and it seemed to make sense. So sorry. Then dharana and pratyahara, I'm just skipping that. And then art of living, I learned from a center in South Delhi. And why did it happen? Because I was feeling little low and incomplete at that time. And it was strongly recommended by Jaya Agarwal, and she's on this call today. And coincidentally or accidentally, I introduced her to TM, and she continued for a while. And then she said, look, I've done TM and art of living, and I found something incomplete in TM. So why don't you try this? I said, okay, doesn't matter. So I went ahead and learned art of living. And then, I went to this Coimbatore ashram of Sadhguru, and there's a co-seeker. He also happens to be my co-brother, Tarun Khiwali is a fashion photographer. And my boss and mentor in Reliance, Mr. Vinod Menon. And at that time, I'd already written my book. So they said that, look, you're doing all these things, so it might be worthwhile for you to go and spend some time with Sadhguru. And this program was directly conducted by him, a small batch of 25. So that's what I did. And none of these methods actually forced any yam niyam. It might be because they were kind of targeted for the Western audience. And if you start with the list of do's and don'ts, you don't even have a starting point. So that might be one of the reasons. So I never very consciously thought that, although having been exposed to Patanjali Yoga Sutras, that, that's a prereq, as we used to call it in bits. So I said it'll happen as we go along. Okay. So what has been, the seeds of my spiritual quest? So, I've always been very curious as how does the universe works. And in class 11 and 12, when one was preparing for joint entrance examination, I was more asking questions. Why is there gravity? Why is this? Why is there friction? And brilliant tutorials used to be quite a renowned, tutorial. I was taking their course. So their physics professor, I still have that letter. So he said, young man, what you're asking is beyond the realm of physics and science. So you're knocking the wrong door. And I happened to travel to Chennai and went and met him. He says, buddy, you just focus on your exams. This is not science. What are you talking about? And also I have a connection with Rishikesh. My mother belongs there. And I have first cousins, and having studied in Dehradun, often I was visiting there. And if you are in Rishikesh, I'm sure many of you have been there. I mean, you can't escape Baba, sadhus, godmen. Some of them are not so impressive, but I can tell you I've met some really impressive guys and heard, really mystical stories. So that also had some kind of an impression on me. So the seeds were sown at that time. And my active quest, it's not that I was actually searching or researching for any path or guru. If you just see, the things just kept happening and I kept flowing with them, Log milte rahe aur karwa banta raha, as they say. It just happened. So no credit to me. So here I come to, TM. So the picture you see here, I'm not sure many of you are exposed. So this Jai Gurudev is what Maharshi Ji used to, address him. So he was the Jagat Guru Shankaracharya of Jyotirmat, in Uttarkashi. And after a lot of persuasion, he agreed to be the Shankaracharya at the age of 70. And he had left home at the age of 8. And there are many stories, but the ones official, unofficial I've heard is that Maharshi Ji was his favorite disciple. But Maharshi Ji is actually a Srivastava, he's a Kayas. And he could not be the Shankaracharya. And he had two boons, one was Saraswati and one was Kuber. So he gave Saraswati to the guy who became the Shankaracharya after him. And he gave Kuber to Maharshi Ji. And as you might have read, when Maharshi Ji passed away, there was dispute of 60,000 crores worth of his assets. So that's Maharshi Ji. Okay, and the picture below is, of the Beatles. And I don't think this is of Rishikesh, but I'm not very sure. And so what are my learnings from TM without getting into too much? So I find the technique to be simple, natural, spontaneous, and effortless. I do think it's a stress buster. And as per the promise, it covers up for lost sleep. So if you have an exacting job and you're not able to catch enough sleep, I think it does the trick. And also, surprisingly, sometimes they tell you in the method, but you can actually feel, as if your nerves are bound and they're being unbound. You can actually feel some toxicity or something getting out if you get into the deep states. And of course, initially, I couldn't differentiate between deep sleep, dreaming, meditating, because my family and my mother particularly used to say ki abhi 1 ghanta soega baithe baithe. Well, actually I was meditating. But later I also figured out that I was sleeping for most of the time. But eventually I figured out when I was sleeping, and sometimes I was also meditating. And also, this is a very, very addictive technique. So for example, many days when I was not able to meditate and we were going out for fun, dinner with friends, movie, I always felt there's something missing. And it's not because of any guilt, it's just that you feel, so it's an addictive technique. And beauty of this technique is it's guilt-free and judgment-free. So I remember this anecdote that once a lady, a very renowned lady, in America asked Maharshi Ji, you asked me to meditate 20 times, 20 minutes in the morning and evening. And I think I'm hardly on the mantra. So this meditation has the mantra. So he says, so what? So she says, out of 20 minutes, maybe 1 minute I'm on the mantra and off the mantra. So I'm only meditating for 1 minute. So he says, who told you that being on the mantra is meditation? So, that's a very hard hitting thing, that being on the mantra, off the mantra, or in mindfulness, when you're on the watching your breath or any other technique, that guilt, oh, I was thinking of all types of things. I think this meditation relieves you of that pressure. And also, I have seen, I will not say enough statistically valid data sample, but it does help in lowering of blood pressure. And it also does, trigger creativity. So sometimes during the meditation or after meditation, some solution will burst in your head, which you never thought of before or after. If you capture them, then it's there with you, otherwise you lost it. And also for people like me who always keep forgetting things to do, and also forget where I've written my things to do, so this meditation helps to remind you of some important things that you may have forgotten. So I think the difference between urgent and important, at least that's what I've seen, it's really saved me many times, to tell you at the right time, hey buddy, you're missing that. So that's what it is in TM. uh, I don't know if you heard of this. This is called TM Siddhi. This also became very controversial. It was called the flying meditation, where people actually used to, get levitate up. And what this method was basically is that once you've been practicing transcendental meditation for 3 or 4 years, and you are getting into deep states, and I can only tell you what I'm allowed to tell you, because a lot of protocol. So what it says is that if you are in that state, and you firstly you cannot know you're in that state, because the moment you know you're in that state, you're out, right? You become conscious. So you're not conscious, but you know you're in that state. So it's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction. But yes, once you meditate for a number of years, you know when you're about to get into that state. And when you're in that state, I'll not call it samadhi, but it's a very, very deep state. At that time, you instill some qualities that you want, whether it's fearlessness, compassion, and then that gets manifest inside you. But also, one of the sutras, you plant the sutras, and in that state of mind, one of the sutras is also about flying. So I will not like to comment whether it's real or not real. Maharishi Ji had conducted an event at Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium long back. I happened to attend that, and I could actually see people flying, but I don't know how real it is. As far as I'm concerned, I never got levitated, but yes, I also felt, like very, very big earthquakes, that kind of a feeling. Okay. So this is the current situation of the Maharshi Ji's ashram. What you say here, it's called the Beatles ashram now. I never knew that. From when we were kids, we used to call it Chaurasi Kutia. Why Chaurasi Kutia? Because there are 84 huts like this. Actually you can count them, and they are like small caves, where people used to meditate. And now I think this whole place is abandoned. And this is the one hall, meditation hall. So this is the situation. This building which you see, I actually stayed in this building for 45 days, and it's in this shape. It's like this shape. And, jokingly, I tell myself, the first night I slept, I was alone in this building. And thank God the ghosts did not know that I'm alone. Otherwise, they would have taken me away. Only I knew I'm alone. So of course, next day I had another guy who learned TM Siddhi, and I had one teacher, and it was a very impressive building, good food, good ashram. But of course, and why did I do TM Siddhi? Because before joining BITS, I had a plan to go and join Maharishi International University at Fairfield, Iowa. I also had, as I told you, from my family, some connection with the Maharishi's family. And for them, this program was required. But then I got into BITS, and there were other issues. So this never worked out. So this is about, my journey with TM. Now we move to next. So art of living, as I said, I was doing TM, and I had, reached a point in my life and career where things were not, looking very great for me. I think that is also the time I just switched from Honda to Reliance. So I do feel that art of living is a great mood elevator from my first hand experience. And if you're low, anxious, it's a great energy booster. That's I can say for sure, apart from several other benefits. And then Sahaj Samadhi, they also have something called, which is pretty similar to transcendental meditation. And as you would know, Maharshi Ji and Sri Sri were together. at one point in time. And I have also seen the inauguration of the Noida Maharshi Nagar, where what I'm told is I was very young at that time, but what I have read in some of the books that Shri was in charge of the entire inauguration, and Shri would have reached where he is today, even if he had stayed with Maharshi, because he was really close to Maharshi and, one of his favorite disciples. But he decided to find his own way, and, he discovered this technique. And also, I learned over a period of time, they have something called guided meditation. So I initially had some struggle figuring out what's guided meditation, because TM clearly tells you that you have to transcend. That's transcendental meditation. So there's no thought, there's nothing, there's no mantra, there's no you. But guided meditation, you're listening something and doing. But when I actually practiced it and I experienced it, I really felt that at least Shri's voice, if you do guided meditation, you really understand what's the meaning of let go. And of course, you feel assured that there is a guiding light. And just when he says, kuch karna nahi hai, aram se baith jaiye. I mean, the way he says is kuch karna nahi hai means, ye jo hadbadahat hai, ye jo bhagna hai, I mean, just leave it. Right now, just leave it. And as Rupa was talking about, once you train yourself physically, then you build. So once you, even in that guided meditation, learn to let go of whatever you're chasing, I think that has a big impact on you. And during lockdown, I had lots of experiences. Uh, I mean, good and bad. And, of course, when you have a lot of time at home and, of course, so then you think a lot. I had other experiences. So I happened to do the advanced program. And again, this time, not a suggestion, but an order by Jaya. She says, you've been escaping for a long time, so you better do it. And, I really say that if there was no lockdown, there's no way I could have taken 4-5 day leave. So I took leave and did it. And yes, I felt a very, very deep connect with Shri. It's not that there was no connection, but the way this program is structured, and I really think it's a very, very impactful program. And I, feel grateful I did it. And, as I was mentioning that what I have experienced from Art of Living is that Shri's presence, his voice, his talks, tell you only one thing. Itna mushkil nahi hai. Humne banaya hua hai. And, I've seen him a couple of times. I've not really, I mean, very recently, there was a function in Delhi, and, Chief of Army Staff was coming, and, I saw him from, I think, less than a feet of distance, because there was some security issue. And he was sitting just, I was sitting just behind him. And I could just feel, sometimes it's, I mean, when you see Modi or Bipin Rawat or some big guy, definitely your mind imagines a lot of aura. So even if I discount that, I mean, you can really feel something in his presence. So I think he has a very calming, very reassuring kind of impact, and people with whose nerves are very frazzled out, and I think do definitely stand to benefit with any association with the Shri or his methods. Next, so Sadhguru, how did it happen? So Tarun Khiwal is a very dear friend of mine. I don't think he's been able to join today. His son has just left for Canada today, and he read my book, and so did Shali and her husband. She's on this call, Naveen Gupta and Jaya and Anuradha, many others. And for for Sadhguru, Tarun Khiwal, he does a lot of work with Sadhguru, and he's closely associated with him, and also one of my bosses in Reliance. He told me, Rajiv, I know you've read this book, but you're somebody who will really connect well, and you must, go there. So what was my experience there? So when I went to that place, what I felt is that event management and organization was better than what we do in Honda. And Honda, we're crazy for perfection. And I've written their HBS, Harvard Business School. Whatever little experience I had in that place, I mean, I think what is perfection is what I saw there. And the second place I saw that was in Sadhguru's ashram. So you are woken up with a flute. Actually, a guy is playing the flute and he wakes you up. And when you go for dining, it's only lit by oil lamps. and there's, Isha sounds playing, and Sadhguru suddenly comes and dances with you. Food is divine, heavenly, I overrate, and it's just, I don't know what kind of a place that is. And, you see the hills in the back. So it was a tremendous experience. And I think I needed that because, I was just thinking what to do with my life, at that time. I'm still thinking, but that time I was thinking more intensely, you know. And other things that you do with Sadhguru is that, this was, I don't think there's such a program available today because, I mean, this is way back in 2009. Of course, Sadhguru was big that time also. And, he will meet you twice a day for a couple of hours. Then he took us for a trek on the elephant path, and he used to say, don't be surprised, we have taken their space, and he'll take you to a trek through the forest. You are having lunch by the stream. So what I'm trying to say with all that is not trying to show, but I'm saying that, the method alone is not everything. The presence of the master, he's playing, frisbee with you in the morning, and somebody like, Sadhguru is doing all that with you. I think it does something. It does something to you. And I'll show you some pictures in the next slide. So you take a dip in ice cold water, which is coming directly from the mountains, and there's a, mercury shivling, there inside the water. You touch it, you get energized, and you go to the Dhyan Linga. And it was, I mean, the place was works. You have a dance, drama, and you have the final initiation by Sadhguru in Shambhavi. And one thing I found in inner engineering is that it does good justice to balance, asanas, pranayama, and to some extent, yam niyam, and, of course, the meditation. And Shambhavi, I don't know for those of you who have done or not done, I mean, I can't even describe the experience, when I got that final initiation. And as I said, we were just 25 people. And I mean, I saw something, and it is not imagination. And, they were all people, they were all very objective, scientific managers, that kind of people. And it was really a very, very, mesmerizing experience to get initiated there. So that's what it is for inner engineering. I feel that I think because I had to complete the loop the other way around. So I think that's how it happened in my life. And these are just some pictures for those of you who have not seen the ashram. This is the entrance to the, Dhyana Linga. This is the passage. And there's a huge dome kind of a thing. You can sit in the bhavanas and meditate, a very powerful and huge shivling there. So, I mean, I'll strongly recommend, for anybody gets a chance, must go there for a couple of days. This is the place where what I was talking about. You go down deep, down the staircase. There's a shivling and Sadhguru dancing with you. This is not from my program, but I mean, he does exactly like this. Okay. So then, because just in the interest of time, so for those of you who know or who don't know, I also wrote a book, in the year 2006. So it was called Spirituality Unplugged. And then the names I mentioned, Naveen, Shali, and Radha, some of my other friends, VP, and they, saw the book and they said, hey, you need to rewrite it. So I rewrote it and it came out in another edition. The only claim to fame is that, some of the very powerful people who are connected with spirituality, like Mr. Vittal Nadkarni, who's the editor of Times group of both science and spirituality. I mean, he really liked the book, and Praveen Chopra, founder of Life Positive, etc. But the book didn't do too well. I mean, the only claim to fame is that it got reprinted twice, which doesn't mean much, but yes, at least the initial copies got sold. And then one fine day, the owner of Hind Pocket Books read this, and he invited me and published those. And this guy over there is my cousin who did the translation into Hindi. So this is, what I did. Now, why did I write the book if I was not sure which way I'm headed? And why did an unenlightened and uninvolved seeker, what was he trying to do? And, won't his interpretation, confuse people? So what was my purpose of writing the book? Not that I'm an enlightened guy, but, to share questions and doubts that I struggled with. And being in sales and marketing, I always look at conversion ratio and retention ratio. So what I've always felt is if 1,000 people or 10,000 people think about a method, maybe 1,000 learn and maybe 100 stay, and maybe, 10 or 15 only continue for more than 5 years. So there's a lot of dropout. So what I wanted to tell people through the book is that you're not alone. Others are also battling on this path. And the dark night of the soul or other kind of challenges that you go through, don't feel bad that you've gone mad or something is wrong with you. Because, many people have a smooth run. They can find a guru. They have a method. Everything is going well for them. But they are in that 10 or 15 or 20 out of the 10,000 who think about spirituality. But the balance struggle a lot. So this book tried to answer and develop frameworks as to if the answers exist, and there are other people who've been there, and is there some lesson for you. And as I said, I wrote the demystified version, and the feedback I got from my book is that it reads like a manual. It's like a textbook. It has like PPT, bullet points. So I rewrote the book, in the form of a story of a seeker and the stages it goes through. I hired quite a renowned artist, from Mumbai to do the sketches, but I never printed it. Firstly, I got exhausted because there were so many people working on it, my editors and co-editors, that this will work, this will not work. So I got exhausted. And second, when I wrote the book, and Tarun Khewal, Naveen Gupta, Shali, Mr. Sai, VP, Jayan Radha, so many of them, Mr. Ajay Goel, read the book and they told me so many things. And that's the time I realized, people know so much more than me, and they're not writing books or even talking about it. So I should just keep shut for some time, till I gather some more information. And that's not trying to be humble, but that's a honest confession. I really felt that, I need to get my own act together. And if at all I feel, that I have something different to say or worthwhile to say, then I might publish this book. The manuscript, of course, I have it ready. So finally, I think I've taken about 22 minutes. So let me see how I can wrap it up. So my 10 lessons from my entire path. Do you need a guru? Or a teacher who can teach you the method will serve you just as well? Why do you need the guru? Is it for the grace? Because they say कि guru की उस दया के बिना, आप पार नहीं हो सकते हो. So is the grace so important? How do you learn a method? Can you learn from self-help books or videos, or style teachers, the ones who will teach you 1-to-1, 5, 6, 10 groups, or large established organizations, the ones like I went to? And also, this is a doubt which, a lot of people start with autobiography of a yogi, and they pick up another books, and then some of them go to Osho, and then they say, wow, I'm having a great time, and then they pick up Gita and Vedanta. So is it okay? Can you get enlightened just by reading? So here is my whatever answer. So first, having a guru always helps. If you're lucky and ready, your guru will find you, And self-learning too. How do you learn a method? I think self-learning can be dangerous. Not because in the ancient times it was all verbal, but simply because, you don't know what you're not doing right. Just like a trainer in the gym or a yoga teacher, and organized setups give you a cohort, and they give you group meditations. So in my language, I call it after sales service. It's not only important to buy a car, but you got to have the right dealership, if you're not doing right, somebody can tell you, buddy, you fix yourself. So I think an organization really helps you to provide that objectivity. And I always feel that, you must balance reading with practice. So my nephew, Abhishek Bhatia, and his wife, Hani Bhatia, they are in Toronto, and I think it's 9 a.m. for them. So he told me one day that he calls me Mama because I'm his Mama, that I had told him at some time, I don't even remember, that stop reading and start practicing, because he reads a lot. So I think he and some other people really, and my own experiences, that you have to balance practice and reading. They have to go hand in hand. And Banshiji used to call it rest and activity are steps to progress. 4, is it better to have all under one roof or mix and match? Of course, it's always better to have all under one roof. All of us want it, right? But it doesn't happen for everybody. Everybody doesn't get that lucky. And second point is permanent versus temporary. So what I mean is that, is it necessary that once a guru, always a guru? Well, the person I have adopted or who has adopted me has to remain with me. So one path and one master, or there can be multiple paths and masters. Like method 1 takes me from point A to point B, and method 2 takes me from point B to point C. And it can also happen that once somebody you once mentored can become your mentor. And by changing a technique or master, are you being unfaithful? Hey, you're questioning God. You're, leaving one God for the other. Are you being unworthy? Are you being a kafir? Is it a recipe for disaster? Or no progress? So my take on all this is that, of course, all under one roof is better, especially if it is practice related. Because I am in the habit of consulting multiple doctors, as you can see, from my method, but I ensure that I don't have two antibiotics. I don't try to mix and match, otherwise it can be a disaster. So from that, what I want to say is better to stick to at least the practice part. I mean, you can read Vedanta, Osho, want to read anybody, that's fine. But don't try to mix and match meditation techniques, because I don't know who will be able to treat if something goes wrong, because the guy won't know what has worked inside your head. Okay. And then second thing is, yes, for some lucky ones, it's one guru, all the life, great connection, bliss, everything. But everybody is not that lucky. And the last line, everybody's journey is unique. So again, I worry about people who quit the path or stagnate and say spirituality is, cock and bull story. It's nothing. I had a pathetic experience. So if it's not working out for you, it's better rather than quitting, try something else till you find, try, of course, and then find your path. So that's what I would say, that it's at least, it's okay to dabble with multiple paths. Of course, after giving adequate time to the one which you are following, rather than, branding spirituality and everything as useless. Prejudice. So judging by seeing a seeker. So I've talked to many people and they say, oh, that Godman, his followers, they're useless. I know that follower, I know he follows that method. He's so lousy. So I call it fooled by data sample inadequacy. It's like an overgeneralization. One guy from, BITS didn't do well in life, so doesn't mean all BITSians are useless, right? Of course, we guys have a bigger sample size, but imagine, only two guys from BITS who didn't do well in life, and then you say, yaar, bekar college hai. So should not suffer from overgeneralization. Also, this is an important point. Sometimes eager weavers or over loyalists who are stooping down, doing dandavat and all that, somebody who's just trying to explore the path, is it for me? They say, hey, what? They just have a pushback. So that's also one of the things I found that happens. And I've also, received a message from one of the method. Congratulations, we've enrolled 40 and achieved our target of enrollment this month. So, somebody who's just starting out and you just dragged him, yeah, method seek lo, he'll say, no, boss, this is not for me. And also some people I've seen, they complain, why did I have to suffer 5 days and 30 hours? They could have taught me that in 5 hours. So why are they extending it? I'll anyway pay the fees. And also some of these methods teach you very elementary games. All of us who, been in corporate life, we've done higher level of assessments, corporate trainings, this, that. And sometimes you say, hey, you know what? I mean, as a GET or a management trainee, I did this and now they're making me do that. So this is, the prejudice that happens by a seeker by looking at others. And other doubt is, how can I surrender till I'm dead sure the master is enlightened? My stakes are very high. What if my guru is fake or incapable and this lifetime is gone? So how do I verify? So spend this lifetime in verifying whether he's fake or right. In next lifetime, you can find the guru. That can be one approach. I'm just kidding. Okay, so seeker, seeker should set a good example, definitely. But don't judge the method or the guru by the few seekers you know. Your data is flawed. Data points are flawed. Focus on practice more than grace. If you're saying, no, I want to ensure that I'll get grace and this guy is capable of giving grace, I really wish there is a technology on artificial intelligence that can, distinguish between fake guru and genuine guru. Maybe we all in this group can try to create a, $1 billion enterprise around that. But as of now, there none exists. You figure out much later after being fleeced that the guy was not okay. So just follow the prescribed method and operating procedure. Give it time. Be patient. Don't prejudge. ये तो चलने वाला नहीं है. ये तो बेकार है. So that will then definitely not work. So don't let your prejudice prevent the technique to work. Also, don't be so blinded that you cling to something that's not working for you. you know what, if I change, then anyway I'm doomed. So you are anyway doomed now also. So why not change? So that's what I, meant, and this has a relation with my previous point. I'll try to finish it up in next 3 or 4 minutes. So, how do we judge a guru? If we have a good speaker or good writer, charismatic, hypnotic personality, then he's a good guru. What I have learned, and I'm not talking of these three, but also several other godmen, because I must have also created my sales pipeline funnel and then zeroed in on these three conversion ratio. Okay, so I'm saying that the best speaker writer may not have the best method, and the guru you think as God may not be equipped to give you grace. And also the guru who can enlighten you by remotely or by looking at you and touching you may not meet your criteria. I'll give you 2 examples. So here's a guru with pomp and show. You get carried away, millions of followers. This guy must be enlightened. But then you say, this guy has so much pomp and show. He drives this car. He leads this lifestyle. He's not like Ramakrishna Paramahansa, There's something wrong with this guy. So no doubt starts playing. Now I'm asking, what if you get somebody like Ramakrishna Paramahansa? Will you believe him? So there is a quote, and I'll tell you from where it is. He stays in a dilapidated mosque, wears a torn kafni, and was eating roti with an onion. And you expect me to believe he is capable of giving me Brahma Gyan? This is Sai Baba of Shirdi. One of the senior guys was dragged to meet him, and he says, "Oh, this guy, oh." So let's not forget we are humans, Either way, we will judge that this guru is not going to work for me. And so you have to be very careful, And also, you may find the right guru and method, but he doesn't accept you. Let's also be ready for that. So here's my point. Are you really equipped to judge a guru? Are your criteria and filters valid? So the only thing which I think works is pure intention, sincere efforts, noble action, and some bit of seva. I think if you do whatever seva, and especially to the people who can give you nothing in return, then something may the clock might start moving for you a little bit. And then pray with all your being that you find the right guru, find your guru. So meditation alone is not enough. And this is what Jaddu Krishnamurti and many other people talk about. So Osho used to say, look yourself in all your ugliness. But it's easier said than done. Because when you see, your poor qualities, your follies, the defense mechanism of the mind is very difficult to live with yourself, if you find out you're such an idiot. So our defense mechanism will wrap our follies as our qualities. So your selfishness may be wrapped as saintliness. Your pettiness might come wearing clothes of graciousness. And your fear and insecurity might make you very angry and bold. You're an angry young man. But will that drive you to change? We all would have heard our most loved ones. We might have even lost some of them. But do we still care to change? So what is a wake up, shake up call that we are waiting for? And, we have to slowly, consciously, try to, think about the insignificance of I did this, I'm so great, I deserve this, etc., etc. So meditation will increase your sensitivity multifold. Please use that sensitivity to analyze your behavior and motivations, and do not let your defense mechanisms, to allow you to remain ignorant. Of course, it will be painful. Any change process is painful, but be ready to go through that pain if you want any evolution. Last, I come to the Gita group, which happened to me in lockdown. And I think it came into my life as some kind of a last chance that it's time for me to change something. Okay, something is not working for me. And it made me aware once again how little I knew. And the beauty of this is that I could create my own curriculum. It's standardized. We have a particular chapter to read every day. But there's so much else that keeps coming on WhatsApp group that you can customize your learning. And I can trust the intelligence, capability, intentions of the group. There's no hidden agenda. There's no godman trying to fleece anyone over here. And we all have only one agenda. Can we help each other to go to the next stage, no matter where we are standing on the journey? And nobody is judging you, that I'm ahead of you, behind you, at the same level as you. We don't know that. Who among us is, ahead, behind? And I think that's a big blessing that has happened in my life, and I'm grateful that it happened. I want to make a confession to everybody, which I haven't done. in our Sunday talks, I'm often unable to keep pace because my brain is getting rewired from the new things that I'm learning. Mr. Sai has taught me that you can only teach a person jiska patra khali ho. If it is already full, whatever you pour will fall off. So I'm trying to be a better path, and because I've been reading, so I have been trying to clear up some space so that something can come in, from this group. And yes, I have been able to absorb to the extent I have been able to clear up and create that space. And I've made a resolution that through Dropbox and other ways, and use my daughter's help to get more organized, because I can't read all the messages and the lovely things that come here on this group. So that's what I want to do, so that as and when I have time and I'm ready, I don't lose them out. So lessons, 10th point is the lessons from the Gita group. So skipping a few steps of Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga is not okay. So as I mentioned, Mr. Surendra Srivastava is the name of the guy, direct disciple of Maharshi Ji, and I also think his relative, who had reinitiated me. He gave me this book. So from 1985 to 2020, that's the only time it took me to realize that those earlier steps cannot be missed. There's no shortcut. Second, Chaturmasa fasting, which Rajesh, PP Rajesh told me about, and we also often talk about it, is similar to what Rupa said. It's not about the fast. It's about I can do it. And telling the body boss, you're not my master. And importance of chanting. And I think I had one or two calls personally, one-to-one with Rajesh. And I asked him about, say, my favorite question, which method? So again, importance of chanting. And I want to share that, yes, I have restarted some of the chanting, which I had really not done in years. Reconnecting with the scriptures. So, I had read Gita for the first time in class 11. And that Gita Sar I used to read in class 10. But then, not much. So I think this group helped me to connect there. An introduction to several gurus and lineages. And it actually helped me to find out which lineage I belong to. What is the lineage of Maharshi Ji? What is the lineage of Sri Sri, Sadguru? And it really helped a lot. And also one important lesson is no wishing ill for somebody who's done bad to me or settling scores. And thanks to Kishore's presentation for that, because it will only add to my prarabdha. And also, one of the videos VP had sent me, so that's one big lesson I learned. And I used to always say, what have I done to deserve this? So now I have shifted, what is the lesson I'm supposed to learn from this? And also I'm trying to replace angst, resentment when I don't get something, or I think I do good and get kicked in the teeth. And that's a misspelling. It's prasad buddhi. And prasad buddhi means you don't say that prasad is not tasting good. Yeah, aaj swad nahi aaya. You have to look at it with reverence. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm on this kind of a last slide. So why did I come to this path in the first place? So honestly, 100% even today, I have not come to this path because Jagat is mithya and somebody told me that. I know this is the only real world I know. The reason is I wanted redemption from pain and suffering. Okay. So you may ask, aisi kaun si pain and suffering ho gayi? So it's not about zyada ya kam, but it's about how much you feel. I also wanted to overcome void, sadness, because that happiness has kind of eluded me, more often than not. I also wanted to achieve my dreams and ambitions, and I wanted to live a full life. I have never sought moksha, and I really don't mind coming back again and again, as long as I don't have health, financial, relationship issues, and as long as I can live peacefully, and even with toxic environments. And because of the previous slide, I have changed the word people to environments. If you can understand what I mean. So earlier I said if I can get rid of toxic people, so I said if I can live peacefully in toxic environments. So things happened with me, and I went with the flow. So what was my spiritual quest? It was my quench and thirst for knowledge, and to live a full life that I had imagined. And this, I come to the conclusion now. So what do I think now? Very simply, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. So what I'm looking for is to take Sharan of the Lord. And even if I'm doing everything wrong, He has to fix my path, and He has to decide who gives me grace and whether I deserve grace. So, surrender and getting into the Sharan of the Lord. That's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rajiv. Wonderful to hear you. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I overshot the time.
No, I already requested the people